Hey, this is Russ Fischer from Slashfilm.com, and I'm with...
Germain Lussier from Slashfilm.
And we have recently seen the world premiere of The Raid 2, or The Raid 2 Barandal, as it may be called, or I forget what it's going to be called in the US.
I think just The Raid 2.
Is it just going to be The Raid 2 now? Okay, anyway, it's Gareth Evans' sequel to The Raid, which features a couple of returning cast members, picks up right after the first film ended.
Yes.
And it's possibly one of the, well, it's not possibly, it's definitely one of the most violent films I've ever seen.
And I think one of the most exciting action movies I've ever seen, if you can get over the violence.
It certainly has a couple of amazing action set pieces. There are, I mean...
Probably like 6, I would say, something like that.
Yeah,
you know, it's
yeah.
insane.
It's got there's a thing that takes place on the highway, which for me was one of the highlights. There are a whole bunch of one-on-one things. There's a subway fight.
There's a big prison brawl in the mud.
Yeah.
There's something in a toilet stall.
Yeah, exactly.
It's crazy. And, you know, the first Raid was basically this cop goes into a building and has to work his way up to the top, right? This picks up right there, and it's not singular. It's not contained. It's a big sprawling story, and it's a big sprawling crime drama, pretty much, at the center with these action scenes to punctuate. So you get a lot more narrative here, a lot more dialogue.
Yeah, essentially Rama, the main character from The Raid, is dropped into the middle of kind of a territory battle for Jakarta between two crime families, and he's put into prison to try to get close to one of those crime families. Obviously he's undercover, nobody knows. He succeeds, and things go from there. And you know, it's with The Raid, you could almost say just forget about the story and watch the action. Mm-hmm. It's that kind of movie. You know, it's kind of like the first on Bach or something like that, where there's a story. If you like it, that's great. But if you don't, it doesn't really matter because it's so controlled and it's so small, and the action is really everything else. In this movie, which is almost 2.5 hours long, or is 2.5 hours long, the story is a big deal. It's not a thing that you can set aside.
No.
And I don't think it's all that successful.
No, I think the story is really pretty simple. We've seen it before. I mean, like, we've seen it done a lot better.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean, the first film that came to mind for me was The Departed, which was a remake of Infernal Affairs.
Yeah.
And that does the undercover cop thing in a much more interesting way.
Yeah.
But I think you have to give... You're right. And so some of this is a little bit... We've seen it before. But punctuated with these action scenes that you've never seen before. Like, literally, I'd say every 5 miners, you're seeing something action-wise you've never seen before in a movie.
Yeah. Yeah, or you haven't seen it, or you haven't seen it with this intensity. You know, you haven't. There's a lot of new stuff here. Yeah, no question.
Yeah.
I just like with the story, I didn't find that I wasn't connected to the characters, and the performances physically are amazing. Dramatically, a little less so.
I think so,
You know?
and I think there's a couple characters that are in there that don't really serve much of a purpose. You know, they're very one note.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's not like, you know, there's a lot of buzz saying how great it is, and I think it's absolutely that. Yeah. But I don't think it's like this, you know, cinematic overall masterpiece. People are saying The Godfather. It's not The Godfather.
No.
I mean,
exactly.
It resembles The Godfather in that it's about organized crime.
Right. But that's it.
But then if you took The Godfather and made it, you know, dumbed it down and put in like some of the best, I think probably the best action I've ever seen in a movie.
Yeah.
You have The Raid 2.
And then, I mean, there's also, I've mentioned this on Twitter, there's really a more is more approach to the action. And, you know, at least one friend of ours who has a pretty strong stomach for things was totally put off by it in the end.
Walked out of the movie.
Left the movie before it ended.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things I liked about the action, besides the incredible hand-to-hand combat and some gun stuff, is that it's sort of a harking back to the blunt object. We got hammers, we got baseball bats. Yeah. We have a lot of that stuff, and it's... Yeah. I mean, I was like, when's the last time we've seen like a baseball bat fight in a movie? And it's been a while, and like it was just...
or even the use of a baseball in a baseball bat fight.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever seen that, and that's just so cool. Yeah, and and it just, in every scene, every action scene, I think pretty much gets bigger and bigger and bigger, leading up to this epic showdown between, again, and here, that actually the final action scene is a one-on-one fight, and it's pretty much, it's amazing. It's one of the best fight scenes ever put on film, but the character that the main guy's fighting, we don't know much about him. We just know he's badass. So that sort of is the movie in a nutshell.
Exactly. Yeah, it's actually a good point. That's a good way to look at it. And it's And even there, I mean, yeah, it's like there's so many there are incredible details, but also really grotesque and gruesome details. I don't know how they're going to release this cut of the movie with any rating. I mean,
Evan said that they're almost done. There's a couple little things to do, but the NPAA hasn't seen the film yet. As of late January,
and they're going to lose their minds.
Yeah, there's a couple of shots in here that I think will definitely maybe something with
be trimmed,
trimmed, because there's lingering on like some violent stuff.
Some really gruesome stuff.
Yeah,
which some of you are going to love, and some of you are definitely going to want to see, and that's probably going to end up on the Blu-ray.
Yeah,
and I mean, as a fan of effects and gore effects and makeup and all that stuff, there's stuff in this movie that's really top notch.
And the practical stunts and stuff is just unfathomable. The choreography is just, unreal.
And there's some manipulation of speed, you can tell. There's a little bit of frame rate playing around and things like that. But it's still, I mean, compared to almost anything that you've seen, even in like the Bourne series, obviously is a benchmark for action in the U.S., and I mean, this just goes so far.
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of people have been saying on Twitter, so I don't want to take the credit, saying that Gareth Evans with this movie cements himself as probably the best action director out there right now. And I would find a lot that difficult to argue after seeing The Raid 2, just because the way he can do any kind of action, make it so visceral and gut punching, and so innovative. It is something new, and it's something for other filmmakers to aspire. He was talking to some of his influences. He's going to be an influence on people. This film in particular.
Yeah, and there's stuff that he does. He does, and he does things with closed spaces, which, I mean, I guess having seen The Raid is not a surprise. But he does things with, like, the first fight in the film is in a toilet stall, as Germain mentioned, and it's a scene that in a lot of American movies would be one of the big action scenes in the movie. It's the first thing in this film.
Yeah, and that was one of the things too. And just wrap up here in a minute. But the editing is pretty at the beginning a little off-putting.
It's a little loose. It's weird.
It's very weird. It goes from you're jumping between times. It takes a little bit to get acclimated to the movie.
Yeah, and especially when characters are not introduced with a lot of detail, and that contributes to the drama and the story being less powerful than they want.
Right. Yeah, but I think if you have any interest in this movie or action movies, you're going to love it.
It's a genre movie. It is a movie for a hardcore, serious audience that is ready to see people being broken in every way they can be broken. If that sounds good to you, then you're gonna love at least parts of the Raid 2.
And you're going to be cheering in the theater at the violence, which is kind of sadistic, but that's what this movie is.
Exactly.
You can find more of our work
on slashfilm.com.
Thank you so much.